What happens when the most powerful alien queen in the galaxy discovers that her seemingly modest human husband has been hiding the true terrifying nature of his species? For 3 years, Queen Zarathal of the Nexarian Empire believed humans were a peaceful, unremarkable race, perfect diplomatic partners, and even better companions. Her human husband, Dr. James Mitchell, seemed to confirm every assumption, gentle, scholarly, always choosing words over weapons. But when a coalition of hostile alien races threatens to destroy Earth and enslave humanity, the Queen is about to witness something that will shatter everything she thought she knew. The humans aren't just hiding their capabilities. They've been restraining something so powerful, so ruthlessly efficient, that even the galaxy's most feared predators would think twice before awakening it. Sometimes the most dangerous creatures are the ones who choose to be gentle. And sometimes love means watching your partner become something magnificent and terrible when their family is threatened. The galaxy is about to learn why humans don't start fights. They finish them. Queen Zarathal of the Nexarian Empire stood at the viewport of her flagship, watching the blue-green marble of Earth slowly rotate below. Her 4 arms were crossed in contemplation, her crystalline skin catching the light of Sol in prismatic patterns. After 3 years of marriage to James Mitchell, she still marveled at how perfectly unremarkable his homeworld appeared. No massive defense platforms, no weapons satellites, no signs of the military might that had built the other spacefaring civilization she knew. It was exactly what she had expected from humans. "My queen," came the melodic voice of her aide Veltar, approaching with the careful grace all Nexarians used in the presence of royalty. "Dr. Mitchell requests your presence in his laboratory. He says he has something important to show you." Zarathul's mandibles clicked in amusement. James and his endless scientific curiosities. In the 3 years since their diplomatic marriage had blossomed into genuine love, she had learned to appreciate her husband's gentle obsession with knowledge. While other species built weapons, humans built libraries. While others conquered, humans explored. It was refreshing, really, to be married to someone from such a peaceful race. She made her way through the corridors of her flagship, noting how the crew moved with practiced efficiency around the human scientific equipment James had installed. Most of it was laughably primitive by galactic standards, but her husband insisted his human perspective was valuable for their ongoing diplomatic missions. She indulged him because she loved him and because human insights, while limited, occasionally proved surprisingly useful. The laboratory door hissed open, revealing James hunched over a holographic display. At 42, he still maintained the lean build of his younger years, though his brown hair now showed threads of silver at the temples. He looked up as she entered, his warm brown eyes lighting up with the smile that had first captured her attention during the initial diplomatic negotiations. "Zara, perfect timing," he said, straightening up. Unlike most aliens who met her, James had never shown fear or excessive deference. It was one of the things she loved about humans. Their inability to be truly intimidated seemed to stem from simple ignorance of just how dangerous the galaxy could be. "What new puzzle has captured my brilliant husband's attention today?" she asked, moving to his side. The hologram showed star charts of the local galactic arm, with various fleet movements marked in different colors. James's expression grew serious. "I've been monitoring communications traffic from the Hegemony Coalition. Zara, I think they're planning something big. Something that involves Earth." The Hegemony Coalition. Zarathul's skin darkened with concern. The alliance of 6 warrior races had been expanding aggressively for the past decade, conquering or enslaving every species they encountered. Only the major powers like her Nexarian Empire had been strong enough to maintain independence, and even that was becoming increasingly difficult. "Show me," she commanded. James manipulated the hologram, highlighting fleet movements. "Look at this pattern. 17 battle fleets, all converging on this sector over the past month. That puts them within striking distance of Earth, and more importantly, within striking distance of our main diplomatic routes." Zarathul studied the display, her mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. They mean to cut off human space from our protection. If they control this sector, Earth becomes isolated. But that's not the worst part. James pulled up another display. 222. I intercepted this transmission yesterday. The image resolved into the reptilian features of War Chief Gorthak of the Hegemony Coalition. His scarred hide and cybernetic eye implants spoke of countless battles. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The human world will serve as the perfect demonstration, Gorthak was saying to an assembly of other coalition leaders. Their defenders are weak, their technology primitive. When we broadcast their subjugation across the galaxy, every remaining free species will understand the futility of resistance. We begin the assault in 7 days. The transmission ended, leaving silence in the laboratory. Zarathal felt a cold fury building in her chest. She had grown genuinely fond of humanity during her time among them. They were like children in many ways, innocent, curious, completely unprepared for the realities of galactic warfare. The thought of the Coalition's brutal forces descending on Earth's peaceful cities made her want to tear something apart with her bare claws. "How many ships are we talking about?" she asked quietly. The intelligence suggests over 300 vessels in the initial wave. Dreadnoughts, carriers, planet crackers. Zara, this isn't a conquest, it's an extermination. B-650. 300 ships. Even her own Imperial fleet, one of the most powerful in the galaxy, counted only 47 vessels. The mathematics were brutal and simple. "We have to warn them," she said. "Get me a channel to Earth's Planetary Defense Council." James nodded, his fingers dancing over the controls with the efficiency she had come to admire. Humans might be primitive, but they were remarkably quick learners. The hologram shifted to show the distinguished face of Admiral Sarah Chen, the current head of Earth's Modest Defense Force. "Your Majesty," Admiral Chen said with a respectful nod. "Dr. Mitchell, what can we do for you?" Zarathul found herself studying the human admiral's face. Like James, there was no fear there, just professional attention. Did these people simply not understand what was coming for them? "Admiral, we've intercepted Coalition communications. They're planning a major assault on Earth. Over 300 vessels. You need to begin immediate evacuation procedures for your major population centers." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "With trust, Teddy." "I see. When?" 7 days. Possibly less. Thank you for the warning, Your Majesty. We'll take it under advisement." The connection ended, leaving Zarathal staring at the empty hologram. Take it under advisement? Her husband's people were about to face annihilation, and their military leader's response was to take it under advisement? "James," she said carefully, "is Admiral Chen typical of human military leadership?" Her husband was already pulling up another display, this one showing Earth's pathetic excuse for a defense fleet. 12 frigates, 37 patrol craft, and a handful of orbital platforms that wouldn't last 5 minutes against a coalition dreadnought. "Sarah's good at her job," James said absently. "One of the best we have. She'll make the right call. The right call. Against 300 warships with 12 frigates and some patrol boats." Zarathul felt her heart's breaking. Her husband's people were brave. Certainly, but bravery wouldn't stop antimatter torpedoes. "James, we need to discuss evacuation. My ships can carry perhaps 50,000 civilians to safety. It's not much, but—" "Zara." James's voice was gentle but firm. "We appreciate the offer. We really do. But humans don't abandon their home." "This isn't about pride." The words came out harsher than she intended. "This is about survival. Your entire species will do what it has to do." James turned to face her fully. "You know, in all our time together, I don't think I've ever told you about human history. Our real history? I've read the cultural files, your wars, your literature, your scientific achievements. The sanitized version, yes. The diplomatic summary. James moved to another console, pulling up historical records. But there are things we don't usually share with other species. Things that might complicate relationships. The hologram showed images of Earth throughout its history. Ancient battles, medieval warfare, industrial conflicts. But as the timeline progressed, the images became increasingly disturbing.
Weapons of mass destruction.
D. Cities reduced to ash. Soldiers fighting in conditions that would break the spirits of most galactic species. Every human child learns about the Great Wars, James continued quietly. World War I, World War II, the Resource Wars, the Climate Wars. Conflicts that killed hundreds of millions of our own people. We learned, Zara, that war is hell. That violence only breeds more violence, that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. The images shifted to show the aftermath, reconstruction efforts, peace treaties, the gradual formation of Earth's unified government. When we reached the stars and met other species, we made a choice. We decided to be better than we were. To be the diplomats, the mediators, the peaceful explorers, because we knew what the alternative looked like. Zarathul studied the historical records with growing unease. The scale of destruction humans had once inflicted on themselves was staggering. But that was the past, surely. These were clearly a reformed people, gentled by hard-learned wisdom. James, I understand your people have overcome a violent history, but that was centuries ago. Modern humans are still human, he finished softly. Zara, do you know what my doctorate is in? She frowned. Xenobiology, I thought. Comparative species analysis. That's my cover specialty. My real field is military history and strategic analysis, specifically asymmetric warfare and psychological operations. James's voice remained calm, conversational. I've spent the last 15 years studying how smaller forces can defeat larger ones. It's fascinating work. A chill ran down Zarathul's spine. James, you're a professor. You've never hurt anyone in your life. No, I haven't. None of us have for a very long time. We've been very, very good. His smile was gentle, but something in his eyes had changed. But being good is a choice, Zara. And sometimes, when people threaten your family, you have to choose differently. The laboratory fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Zarathul looked at her husband, really looked at him, and for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't sure what she was seeing. The gentle professor was still there, but underneath... The coalition has made a mistake, James continued, turning back to his displays. They think humans are weak because we choose to be peaceful. They think Earth is defenseless because our fleet is small. They're about to learn the difference between can't fight and won't fight. James, what aren't you telling me? Before he could answer, an alert chimed through the ship's communication system. Veltar's voice followed immediately. My queen, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. Admiral Chen requests immediate conference. The hologram activated, showing Admiral Chen's face once again. But now, Zarathul noticed details she had missed before. The Admiral's office wasn't the civilian government building she had assumed. The walls were lined with ancient weapons, swords, rifles, battle flags from conflicts spanning human history. And the Admiral's uniform bore decorations that suddenly looked less ceremonial and more practical. Your Majesty. Dr. Mitchell, Admiral Chen began, thank you for the intelligence on the Coalition fleet. We've confirmed their approach vector and timeline. I wanted to personally thank you for the evacuation offer, but it won't be necessary. Admiral, Zarathul said carefully, I don't think you understand the scale of what's coming. 300 warships. Your defense fleet, DSA, will handle it. Admiral Chen's tone was matter-of-fact. Dr. Mitchell, I assume you've briefed the Queen on the situation? James nodded. Basic strategic overview. I was just beginning to explain some of the contextual factors. Ah! Admiral Chen's expression shifted slightly. Your Majesty, has your husband mentioned the Terran defense protocols? Zaratul looked between the two humans. No. Should he have? Well, they've been classified for the past century. We didn't see much point in advertising our capabilities while we were pursuing diplomatic solutions. Admiral Chen smiled, and Zarathal suddenly realized it was the same smile James wore when he was about to reveal a particularly clever solution to a scientific problem. Admiral, she said slowly, what exactly are the Terran defense protocols? The short version? Every human civilian is a trained soldier. Every civilian ship can be converted to military use within hours. Every colony, every space station, every asteroid mining operation has been designed with defensive operations in mind. Admiral Chen paused. We've been preparing for this conversation for a long time, Your Majesty. We just hoped we'd never have to have it. The hologram shifted to show a new display, one that made Zarathul's blood run cold. The civilian shipping routes between Earth and her colonies weren't random commercial paths. They were carefully planned supply lines. The mining operations in the asteroid belt weren't just extracting resources. They were manufacturing facilities. And those research stations scattered throughout human space, military outposts, she whispered. Defensive positions, James corrected gently. We really did hope it would never come to this. Humans make excellent friends, Zara. We're loyal, we're creative, we're genuinely peaceful by choice. But we make very, very poor enemies. Admiral Chen nodded. The coalition will reach Earth in 6 days. We'll be ready for them. The question is, Your Majesty, do you want to watch what happens when someone threatens humanity? Or would you prefer to maintain plausible deniability? Zarathal stared at the two humans, her mind reeling. Everything she thought she knew about her husband's people was shifting, reshaping itself into something far more complex and infinitely more dangerous. I think, she said carefully, I need to see exactly what I married into. Dr. Mitchell, I think it's time for the full briefing. Authorization code Omega 77. James nodded and began pulling up new displays. As the true scope of human preparation revealed itself, Zaratul realized that her peaceful, gentle husband had been hiding something extraordinary. The humans weren't unprepared for war. They had simply been very, very good at pretending to be harmless, and in 6 days the galaxy was going to discover the difference. The next morning brought changes that left Zarathal questioning everything she thought she understood about human nature. She had awakened in her quarters aboard the flagship to find James already gone, having left only a note saying he would be in Strategic Planning Session Alpha. She had never heard of any such session in all their time together. When she made her way to the bridge, expecting to find the usual routine of diplomatic correspondence and trade negotiations, she instead discovered her ship had been transformed overnight. Human personnel she had never seen before moved with military precision through corridors that now hummed with energy signatures she didn't recognize. Equipment had appeared seemingly from nowhere, and her own crew was working alongside humans who wore uniforms she had never seen before. My queen! Veltar approached with obvious confusion in his movements. The humans have requested permission to install additional communication arrays. They say it's for coordination purposes. Coordination with whom? She asked. But even as the words left her mouth, she suspected she already knew the answer. With Earth, Your Majesty, and with every human settlement in this sector. Zaratul made her way to the main conference room, where she found James seated at a table surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time fleet movements, resource allocations, and what appeared to be incredibly detailed military assessments of the approaching coalition forces. He looked up as she entered, and she saw something in his expression that made her pause. He looked focused. Not the gentle, contemplative focus she was used to, but the sharp, predatory attention of someone analyzing a problem that needed to be eliminated. Good morning, love, he said, rising to greet her with a kiss that was still warm and familiar. I'm sorry I had to leave early. Things are moving quickly now. James, what is all this? Where did these people come from? They've always been here, Zara. We just compartmentalized things, Teddy, for security purposes. He gestured to the displays around them. Meet the real Terran Defense Initiative. As if summoned by his words, 3 humans entered the room. Saratul recognized none of them, despite having traveled extensively through human space. The first was a woman who moved with the fluid grace of a trained killer, her dark hair pulled back in a practical style that revealed scars along her jawline. The second was a man whose cybernetic implants were far more advanced than anything she had seen humans use before. The third appeared completely ordinary except for his eyes, which held the cold calculation she had only seen in the most dangerous predators the galaxy had produced. "Your Majesty," the woman said with a respectful nod, "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, Special Operations Command. This is Dr. Fatsho PP, Kevin Park, our AI warfare specialist, and Commander Jiang Wei, Fleet Coordination." "I've never heard of Special Operations Command," Zarathul said carefully. "That's rather the point," Commander Zhang replied with a slight smile. "We've found it's better to let people underestimate human capabilities. Best makes things easier when situations like this arise." Park activated a new holographic display that made Zarathul's breath catch. It showed the Coalition fleet in perfect detail, not just their positions and heading, but thermal signatures, weapon loadouts, even individual crew complements. "How do you have this level of intelligence?" she demanded. "We've been watching them for months," Colonel Martinez replied. "Humans make excellent traders, Your Majesty. We go everywhere. We're invited into ports. We're considered harmless enough to ignore. It's amazing what you can learn when people think you're not worth paying attention to." James moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers in the gesture of comfort she was used to. But now she wondered what else those gentle hands were capable of. "Zara, I need you to understand something. Everything you've seen of humanity, everything we've shared with the galaxy, is real. We genuinely want peace. We prefer diplomacy to violence, cooperation to conquest. But that preference doesn't make us helpless." Commander Zhang manipulated the display, showing the true scope of human preparations. The Coalition thinks they're facing Earth's defense fleet of 12 frigates. What they're actually going to encounter is the largest distributed military force in this sector of the galaxy. "I don't understand," Zarathul admitted. "Every human merchant vessel has been built to military specifications," Dr. Park explained. "Reinforced hulls, hidden weapon mounts, military-grade shields. Every research station has been designed as a fortress. Every colony has underground manufacturing facilities that can produce military equipment at a rate that would make your empire's war factories jealous." The display shifted again, showing shipping routes throughout human space. But now Zarathul could see them for what they really were: a carefully planned logistics network that could support military operations across hundreds of light years. For the past century, since we made first contact with galactic civilization, every major decision humanity has made has been planned with one question in mind. James said quietly, "What do we do if someone tries to destroy us?" The answer is, we survive, and we make sure it never happens again. Zarathul studied the tactical assessments scrolling past. The humans hadn't just been preparing for defense, they had been studying every major military power in the galaxy, analyzing weaknesses, developing countermeasures. The level of detail was staggering. "You've been spying on everyone," she realized. "We've been learning about everyone," Commander Zhang corrected. "There's a difference. We're not interested in conquest or manipulation. We just want to know how to protect ourselves if necessary." "And the Coalition has just made it necessary," Dr. Park added with what sounded like satisfaction. James squeezed her hand gently. "Zara, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. When the Coalition fleet arrives and discovers what humanity really is, there are going to be consequences. Political, military, economic. Are you prepared for that?" Are you prepared to be married to someone whose species isn't as harmless as you thought? She looked around the room at these humans she had never seen before, at the displays showing military preparations that rivaled anything her empire could manage, at her husband, who was somehow both the gentle professor she loved and a strategic analyst planning the destruction of 300 warships. James, what exactly is going to happen when the coalition arrives? Colonel Martinez answered instead, "We're going to teach them why humans don't fight wars, Your Majesty. We end them." Over the next several hours, Zarathal received what James called the complete briefing. What she learned left her fundamentally shaken. Humans hadn't just been hiding their military capabilities. They had been hiding their entire approach to warfare. While other species built bigger ships and more powerful weapons, humans had spent centuries perfecting something far more dangerous: psychological warfare and strategic thinking. The Coalition's fleet is impressive, Dr. Park explained, showing detailed schematics of their ships. But it's also predictable. They follow standard military doctrine because it's worked for them against every species they've encountered so far. What makes humans different? Zarathal asked. We cheat, Commander Zhang said simply. Other species have honor codes, traditional tactics, predictable responses. We've studied all of that, and we've designed our entire defense strategy around exploiting it. The displays showed coalition fleet formations, attack patterns, even psychological profiles of their commanders. The humans had been preparing for this specific battle for months, possibly years. What? How long have you known they would target Earth? She demanded. We've known it was inevitable since first contact, James replied. Earth's position makes it strategically valuable, and our apparent weakness makes us look like an easy target. The Coalition has a pattern. They always test their strength against what they perceive as the weakest link before moving against major powers. So you've been planning for this since the beginning. We've been planning for survival since we reached the stars, Colonel Martinez corrected. This is just the first time we've had to implement those plans. Every aspect of their society had been designed with warfare in mind, but hidden so carefully that even she, living among them for 3 years, had never suspected. The merchant marine isn't just commerce, Dr. P. Park explained. It's the largest mobile military force in the galaxy. Those civilian crews? Every one of them has military training. Those trade goods they carry? Half of them are military supplies disguised as commercial products. Your colonies aren't just settlements, Commander Zhang added. They're military bases that happen to have families living on them. Your research stations aren't studying stellar phenomena. They're monitoring every military movement in this sector. Zarthul felt a chill as the implications sank in. You've turned your entire civilization into a military trap. We've turned our civilization into a guarantee, James corrected gently. A guarantee that no one will ever successfully genocide the human race. Humans had anticipated everything: electromagnetic pulse attacks, biological warfare, even the psychological tactics the Coalition used to break the spirit of defenders. What the Coalition doesn't understand, Colonel Martinez said, is that humans have been fighting wars longer than most species have had spaceflight. We've seen every possible horror that warfare can produce. We've done terrible things to each other and learned to live with the consequences. There's nothing they can threaten us with that we haven't already survived. But more importantly, Dr. Park added, we've learned from every conflict in our history, every mistake, every brilliant strategy, every example of tactical innovation. We've taken the collective military wisdom of thousands of years of human warfare and applied it to galactic-scale operations. The Coalition thinks they're attacking a peaceful world defended by 12 frigates. What they're actually attacking is the culmination of everything humanity has learned about war, disguised as a diplomatic outpost. Zarathal stared at the tactical projections showing the Coalition fleet's approach. In 4 days, they would arrive expecting to find a helpless population ready for subjugation. Instead, they would find something that had been waiting for them with patience that spanned decades. "James," she said quietly, "what are you going to do to them?" Her husband's expression grew somber. "We're going to give them exactly one chance to leave peacefully. If they refuse, we're going to demonstrate why humans prefer diplomacy to alternatives. And if they don't understand the demonstration, then we're going to make sure they never threaten anyone again." The casual way he said it sent chills down her spine. This wasn't boasting or false bravado. It was the calm certainty of someone who had spent years preparing for exactly this moment. "Zara," James continued, "I need you to make a choice. You can take your ship and return to Nexarian space before the Coalition arrives. No one will blame you for avoiding what's coming. Or you can stay and watch humanity reveal what we really are. But if you stay, our relationship is going to change. You'll be married to someone whose species just demonstrated that peaceful doesn't mean harmless." She looked around the room at these humans who had been hiding in plain sight for years, at the displays showing preparations that defied everything she thought she knew about human nature, at her husband, who was somehow still the man she loved, despite being something far more complex and dangerous than she had ever imagined. "I'm staying," she said firmly. "I need to see who I really married." "I was hoping you'd say that, because I have a feeling you're going to be very proud of us." Colonel Martinez checked her chronometer. 4 days until contact. All units report ready status. "Dr. Mitchell, does the Queen require any additional briefings?" "Just one more thing," James said, moving to a final display. "Zara, I want you to see the message we're preparing to send to the Coalition when they arrive." The hologram activated, showing Admiral Chen in what was obviously a military command center, not the civilian office Zara Toole had seen before. When the Admiral spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. "To the Hegemony Coalition fleet approaching Earth, you have entered Terran space with hostile intent. We are prepared to defend our world and our people by any means necessary. You have one opportunity to withdraw peacefully. If you choose to proceed with your attack, you will discover that humanity's reputation for pacifism has been greatly exaggerated. Choose wisely. This will be your only warning." The message ended, leaving silence in the conference room. Zara Toole realized she was trembling, not from fear, but from something else entirely: anticipation. Or excitement. For the first time in 3 years of marriage, she was about to see what humans were really capable of, and despite everything she had learned, she suspected she still had no idea what was coming. The Coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace at exactly 0800 hours Terran Standard Time, their massive dreadnoughts and battlecruisers sliding into normal space with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Zara Thal watched from the bridge of her flagship, positioned at what James had called optimal observation distance. Close enough to see everything, far enough to avoid immediate targeting. War Chief Gorthek's flagship, the Bone Render, was a kilometer-long monument to the Coalition's philosophy of warfare. Its hull was decorated with the bones of conquered species, and its weapon arrays could reduce a planet's surface to molten slag. Around it, 300 vessels of various classes maintained perfect formation, the largest military force assembled in this sector for decades. "Impressive," Colonel Martinez observed from her position at the tactical station. She had been assigned as Zara Thul's liaison, though the Queen suspected her real purpose was to provide commentary on what was about to unfold. But predictable. Standard Coalition approach formation, exactly as we anticipated. "Where are the human ships?" Zara Thal asked, scanning her displays. "Trust Teddy." Earth hung defenseless before the massive fleet, its orbital stations looking pathetically small and vulnerable. "You're looking at them," Commander Zhang replied from the communications console. Before she could ask what he meant, the Coalition fleet opened communications. War Chief Gorthak's scarred face filled the main view screen, his cybernetic eye glowing with satisfaction. "Humans of Earth," his voice boomed across all frequencies, "you will surrender immediately and prepare for processing. Resistance is futile. You have one planetary cycle to respond before we begin bombardment. The response came from Admiral Chen, and Zarathul was struck by how different the human leader looked now. Gone was any pretense of civilian authority. This was a warrior who had been waiting patiently for this moment. War Chief Gorthak, you were warned. You chose to ignore that warning. Earth does not surrender. Earth does not kneel. And Earth does not forgive threats against her children. Gorthak's mandibles clicked in amusement. Brave words from a species with 12 ships and delusions of adequacy. Perhaps watching your orbital stations burn will teach you humility. Perhaps, Admiral Chen replied calmly, but before you begin, you might want to check your sensors more carefully. You seem to have missed something. On cue, every merchant vessel within 50 light-years of Earth suddenly powered up military-grade sensors and weapons. Cargo haulers revealed themselves as heavy cruisers. Transport ships deployed fighter squadrons. Mining barges activated armor plating that would make a coalition battleship envious. The sensor displays throughout the coalition fleet lit up like festival decorations as over 800 human vessels revealed their true nature. They had been hiding in plain sight, scattered throughout the system as innocent civilian traffic. Zarathul watched Gorthak's expression change from amusement to confusion to growing alarm. Impossible. Our intelligence showed only civilian shipping. Your intelligence was correct, Admiral Chen replied. We just have a very different definition of civilian than you do. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. For months, human merchant traffic had been increasing throughout the system. Coalition scouts had noted it, but dismissed it as normal commercial activity. After all, who would suspect cargo haulers and passenger liners of being military assets? First lesson in fighting humans, Colonel Martinez said conversationally to Zarathul. We don't separate military and civilian resources the way other species do. Every human is a soldier if they need to be. Every ship is a warship if circumstances require it. But the revelation of the hidden fleet was just the beginning. As Gorthak struggled to reassess the tactical situation, Admiral Chen continued her broadcast. You wanted to make an example of Earth, War Chief. Broadcast our subjugation to the galaxy to break the spirit of free species everywhere. Well, we're going to give you a broadcast. But the lesson you're going to teach isn't the one you intended. Throughout coalition space, every communication relay, every news network, every military frequency suddenly carried the same signal. The attack on Earth was being broadcast in real time to every corner of the galaxy. How did they do that? Zarathul breathed. Humans are very good at getting places they're not supposed to be, Dr. Park replied with evident pride. We've had people working on coalition communication systems for years. Maintenance crews, technicians, system upgrades. Amazing how invisible you become when you're just trying to be helpful. On the view screen, Gorthak had rallied from his initial shock. Tricks and deceptions, you may have more ships than expected, but we still outnumber you. And our vessels are purpose-built warships, not converted merchants. True, Admiral Chen acknowledged. Your ships are bigger, your weapons more powerful, your armor thicker. By every conventional measure, you should win this battle easily. Then surrender now and spare your people unnecessary suffering. Admiral Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. War Chief, you're about to learn why humans don't measure battles by conventional standards. The first phase of the engagement began with what appeared to be a standard coalition tactic. The massive dreadnoughts moved forward to establish fire superiority while fighter screens deployed to protect the larger vessels. It was textbook military doctrine, executed with the precision that had conquered dozens of worlds. The human response was chaos. Instead of forming defensive lines or attempting to match the coalition's orderly advance, human ships scattered in seemingly random directions. Some accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet, others fled toward the outer system, still others began erratic evasive maneuvers that made no tactical sense. Are they panicking? Sarathal asked, watching the display with growing confusion. Quite the opposite, James replied, appearing at her side. They're implementing Pattern Omega 7. Every human ship commander knows exactly where they need to be and when. What looked like chaos to outside observers was actually a carefully choreographed dance that had been practiced in simulations for decades. Human vessels wove between coalition ships, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively, always moving to positions that would matter in exactly 37 minutes. The coalition, trained in conventional warfare, tried to adapt their formations to counter the seemingly random human movements, but every adjustment they made played directly into human planning. Second lesson in fighting humans, Colonel Martinez observed. We've been studying your tactics for years. Every major coalition battle, every strategic doctrine, every command decision, we know how you think, how you respond, how you adapt. You're fighting against an enemy that has spent decades learning to counter everything you do. The first casualties came when coalition fighters engaged what appeared to be fleeing human transports. The transports turned out to be Q ships, vessels that looked like civilian craft but carried military-grade weapons and experienced crews. Coalition fighters expecting easy kills instead found themselves facing coordinated defensive fire from ships that were far more dangerous than they appeared. But the real surprise came when the coalition's heavy weapons opened fire on what they assumed were legitimate military targets. The massive energy beams and antimatter torpedoes struck their targets with devastating force, only to discover that many of the human warships they were destroying were actually sophisticated holograms. Psychological warfare, Dr. Park explained, watching coalition gunners waste precious ammunition on targets that didn't exist. Every shot fired at a false target is a shot not fired at a real one. And every missed shot tells us exactly where their weapons are positioned and how quickly they can retarget. Meanwhile, the real human warships, disguised as damaged vessels or fleeing merchants, moved into positions that would have seemed impossible to achieve under direct fire. Because they weren't under direct fire, the coalition was shooting at ghosts. 30 minutes into the battle, Gorthik realized he was fighting an enemy that didn't follow any of the rules he understood. His perfectly organized fleet was being dissected by opponents who seemed to anticipate his every move. How are they doing this? He demanded over an open channel. Our tactical computers show favorable odds. Our weapons are superior. Our formations are textbook perfect. That's the problem, Admiral Chen replied. Your formations are from a textbook, and we've read that textbook, War Chief. You're fighting a species that has been preparing for this exact battle since the day we met you. Every tactic you use, every strategy you employ, every decision you make, we've already planned our counter-response. The second phase began when human ships suddenly stopped their seemingly chaotic movements and revealed they had somehow achieved perfect tactical positioning without the coalition noticing. Every human vessel was exactly where it needed to be to create overlapping fields of fire that would devastate the coalition fleet. Impossible, Gorthak snarled. No species can coordinate fleet movements with that precision under combat conditions. Most species can't, Admiral Chen agreed, but most species don't spend 2 centuries perfecting the art of warfare before they reach the stars. Most species don't treat every ship captain like a chess master and every engagement like a puzzle to be solved. And most species don't have the collective military experience of 1,000 different conflicts to draw from. The third phase was slaughter. Human vessels that had been fleeing suddenly reversed course and attacked with weapons that were far more advanced than their external appearances suggested. The merchant ships revealed themselves to be carrying experimental technology that surpassed anything in the coalition arsenal. Antimatter torpedoes found their targets with impossible accuracy. Energy weapons cut through coalition shields as if they didn't exist. But the most devastating aspect wasn't the technology. It was the coordination. Every human ship functioned as part of a single unified intelligence. When one vessel took damage, Others immediately moved to cover. When an opportunity presented itself, multiple ships exploited it simultaneously. When coalition forces attempted to concentrate fire, human vessels were already moving to positions that made such concentration impossible. This is how humans fight, James said quietly to his wife. Not ship to ship or fleet to fleet, but as a single organism with 800 different parts. Every captain thinks like a naval strategist, but they all think toward the same goal. The coalition fleet, despite its size and power, found itself being dismantled piece by piece by an enemy that seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere. Ships that should have been easy targets proved to be death traps. Formations that should have provided mutual support became killing fields for human weapons. Worst of all, every moment of the battle was being broadcast throughout the galaxy. Species that had trembled before coalition might watched in amazement as the supposedly peaceful humans systematically destroyed the most feared military force in the sector. "My queen," Veltar said quietly, "perhaps we should withdraw to a safer distance." Zarathul shook her head, never taking her eyes from the displays. "No, I need to see this, all of it." She was witnessing something unprecedented. Not just a military victory, but a fundamental shift in how the galaxy would view humanity. The gentle diplomats and peaceful traders were revealing themselves as perhaps the most dangerous warriors in known space, and they were doing it with a clinical efficiency that was somehow more terrifying than if they had fought with rage or hatred. Fourth lesson, Colonel Martinez said, her voice carrying something that might have been pride or might have been pity. "Humans don't fight to win battles. We fight to end wars. Permanently." By the time the fourth phase began, it was clear that the coalition fleet was doomed. But rather than accept defeat with honor, Gorthak made the decision that would define humanity's reputation for generations to come. He ordered his remaining ships to target Earth's civilian population centers. The moment War Chief Gorthak gave the order to target civilian population centers, something changed in the human response that made Zarathul's blood freeze. The clinical efficiency that had characterized the battle so far was replaced by something far more primal and infinitely more dangerous. "Civilian targets are now under direct threat," Admiral Chen announced, her voice cutting across all communication channels with absolute authority. "All human forces are authorized to implement Protocol 7. Sartul had never heard of Protocol 7, but the effect on human behavior was immediate and terrifying. Ships that had been executing careful, measured tactics suddenly accelerated with suicidal disregard for their own safety. The coordinated dance of the fleet became a swarm of individual vessels, each one apparently determined to prevent any coalition weapon from reaching Earth's surface. "What's Protocol 7?" she demanded. James answered without looking away from his displays, his voice carrying a tone she had never heard from him before. "The Extermination Protocol. When an enemy targets human civilians, we stop trying to win battles and start trying to ensure that enemy never threatens anyone again." "James, that sounds like genocide," he finished calmly. "Yes, that's exactly what it is. We tried to give them a chance to withdraw. We offered them the opportunity to surrender with honor. They chose to target children instead." On the main display, coalition ships were attempting to reposition their heavy weapons to fire on Earth's cities. But they were discovering that getting a clear shot at the planet required getting past humans who had suddenly stopped caring about their own survival. A human destroyer, its hull already torn open by coalition fire, rammed directly into a coalition dreadnought's main gun battery. The explosion took out both ships, but it also prevented the dreadnought from firing on New London. Similar scenes were playing out throughout the battle space as human crews chose mutual destruction over allowing civilian casualties. "This is madness!" Gorthak screamed over the communications channel. "No species sacrifices military assets to protect non-combatants." "No species except humans," Admiral Chen replied, her tone now carrying something that made Zarathul think of winter storms in deep space. "War Chief, you just made the worst possible mistake. You threatened our families." The human tactical doctrine shifted completely. Instead of the sophisticated strategic maneuvering they had been displaying, human ships began attacking with a brutal simplicity that was somehow more frightening than their earlier precision. They no longer cared about tactical advantage or preserving their own forces. They cared only about preventing coalition weapons from reaching Earth. But Protocol 7 wasn't just about desperate defensive measures. As coalition ships found their shots at civilian targets blocked by suicidal human attacks, they began to realize that the human fleet was still growing. Sensor contact bearing 27 Mark IV, a coalition sensor operator reported. Multiple ships emerging from hyperspace. Impossible, Gorthak snarled. We monitored all human military assets in this sector. The new arrivals weren't military vessels in any conventional sense. They were colony ships, research vessels, deep space exploration craft, the farthest-flung elements of human civilization, arriving from distances that should have made rapid response impossible. How did they get here so quickly? Zarathu asked. Because they've been traveling for days, Commander Zhang replied. The moment our long-range sensors detected the coalition fleet massing, we sent signals to every human settlement, every research station, every colony ship within 200 light-years. Protocol 7 isn't just a tactical doctrine, it's a recall order. When Earth is threatened, every human comes home. The arriving ships weren't designed for combat, but they were crewed by humans who had just learned that someone was trying to kill their families. Colony transports revealed hidden weapon mounts. Science vessels deployed experimental technologies that hadn't been tested outside of laboratory conditions. Even ships that genuinely had no weapons began ramming attacks against coalition vessels. This is insane, Gorthak broadcast. You're destroying your entire space-based population to protect one world. We're destroying yours, Admiral Chen corrected. And yes, we're willing to sacrifice everything to protect Earth. That's what you don't understand about humans, War Chief. We don't calculate acceptable losses when our families are threatened. We calculate acceptable costs to eliminate the threat permanently. The battle had become something beyond conventional warfare. It was an extermination event, and the humans were conducting it with the same methodical thoroughness they had once applied to diplomacy and trade. Coalition ships found themselves facing enemies that couldn't be negotiated with, intimidated, or even understood. Human crews that should have fled when faced with overwhelming firepower instead accelerated toward their attackers. Vessels that should have surrendered when critically damaged instead activated self-destruct sequences in close proximity to coalition ships. They're all insane, Gorthak's tactical officer reported. Our psychological warfare protocols have no effect. They don't respond to threats, they don't fear death, they don't even seem to feel pain. Oh, we feel it, Colonel Martinez said grimly, monitoring coalition communications. We just don't let it stop us. Stay. Humans have a very simple philosophy when our families are threatened. Better to die as heroes than live as cowards. But the most chilling aspect of Protocol 7 wasn't the desperate courage of individual human crews. It was the fact that their seemingly suicidal attacks were still following a larger strategic pattern. Even in their berserker rage, human forces were executing a coordinated plan. Look at the attack vectors, Dr. Park pointed out, highlighting the tactical display. Every suicide run, every ramming attack, every desperate assault, they're all positioned to drive the coalition fleet towards specific coordinates. Zarathal studied the pattern and felt her heart skip a beat. The humans weren't just fighting desperately, they were herding the coalition fleet like prey animals, using their own sacrifices as tools to force their enemies into a killing ground. "What's at those coordinates?" she asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer would be something that would give her nightmares. James activated a new display that showed Earth's solar system in its entirety, including objects that hadn't been visible on previous scans. The Sol Defense Grid. It's been under construction for 50 years, built into asteroids, hidden behind planetary shadows, disguised as civilian infrastructure. The asteroids weren't asteroids. They were weapons platforms. each one larger than a coalition dreadnought and armed with technology that made her empire's most advanced weapons look primitive. The research stations scattered throughout the outer system were revealed as fortress complexes that had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. "You turned your entire solar system into a weapon," she whispered. "We turned our entire solar system into a guarantee," James corrected. "A guarantee that anyone who threatens Earth dies here, in Sol space, where their deaths can serve as a lesson to others." The Coalition fleet, reduced to less than half its original strength and driven into the killing ground by human sacrifice, suddenly found itself facing the full defensive capability of humanity's home system. Weapons that had been hidden for decades, platforms that had masqueraded as civilian installations, activated military systems that outclassed anything in Coalition arsenals. The slaughter that followed wasn't a battle in any meaningful sense. It was an execution. Coalition ships that had dominated battlefields across the galaxy found themselves helpless against human weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Energy beams that could cut through molecular bonds, gravitational weapons that crushed ships like insects, antimatter devices that erased matter at the quantum level. "Where did this technology come from?" Gorthak demanded, his flagship shuddering under impacts from weapons that shouldn't have existed. "From a species that spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other efficiently," Admiral Chen replied. "We just scaled it up for galactic use." But even as his fleet died around him, Gorthak made one final attempt to salvage something from the disaster. "You've won this battle, humans, but the Coalition has thousands of ships, millions of warriors. You cannot fight us all." "We won't have to," Admiral Chen said with terrifying certainty, "because after today, no one will be foolish enough to threaten Earth again." She was right. The battle was being broadcast throughout the galaxy, and species that had trembled before Coalition might were watching in stunned silence as the supposedly peaceful humans systematically annihilated the most feared military force in known space. But the broadcast wasn't just showing the destruction of the Coalition fleet. It was showing what humans became when their families were threatened. The galaxy was learning that the gentle diplomats and peaceful traders were capable of unleashing horrors that would make traditional warriors weep. "Final lesson," Colonel Martinez said, her voice carrying the weight of finality. "Humans don't want to be your enemies. We prefer to be your friends, your partners, your allies. But if you force us to be your enemies, we will be the last enemies you ever have." The remaining Coalition vessels, their fleet command structure destroyed and their war chief dead, attempted to flee the system. They discovered that the humans had been prepared for this possibility as well. Long-range interdiction fields prevented hyperspace escape. Human ships that had been positioned throughout the system cut off conventional retreat routes. The merchant vessels that had been dismissed as civilian traffic revealed themselves as fast attack craft perfectly positioned to hunt down fleeing enemies. None of the Coalition ships escaped. None of them were allowed to escape. When the battle finally ended, Earth hung in space exactly as it had before, peaceful, beautiful, unmarked by the violence that had raged around it. But the space around Earth was filled with the debris of 300 Coalition ships and the scattered remains of the most feared military force in the galaxy. "It's over," James said quietly, putting his arm around his wife. But Zarathal knew it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The galaxy had just learned that humanity's reputation for pacifism was a choice, not a limitation. And that choice could be revoked without warning when human families were threatened. "James," she said carefully, "what happens now?" Now Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication system. "We clean up the debris and get back to our normal lives. The diplomatic corps will probably want to schedule some meetings to discuss recent developments in galactic politics. And if other species decide humans are too dangerous to be allowed to exist." James smiled, but there was something in that smile that reminded her of the weapons that had just erased 300 warships from existence. Then they'll discover that threatening human extinction is an even worse idea than threatening individual human colonies. As her flagship turned toward Nexarian space, carrying news of what she had witnessed. Zarathal realized she was returning home married to someone completely different than the gentle professor she had fallen in love with. Or perhaps James hadn't changed at all. Perhaps she was just finally seeing what humans really were beneath their carefully maintained facade of harmless civility. Either way, the galaxy was about to change. The age of underestimating humanity was over. 6 months after the destruction of the Hegemony Coalition fleet, Zarathal stood in the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, watching as every major species in known space gathered for what was being called the most important diplomatic session in galactic history. The opulent chamber, built to intimidate and impress, now felt somehow smaller with humans present. Not because they were physically imposing. James still looked like the mild-mannered professor she had married, but because everyone in the chamber now knew what lay beneath that gentle exterior. The human delegation requests permission to address the assembly, announced Ambassador Elena Vasquez, the newly appointed human representative to the Galactic Council. She was a small woman with graying hair and kind eyes who looked like someone's grandmother. The effect was completely deliberate. "Permission granted," rumbled the Vorthan Prime Minister, though his usual air of authority seemed somewhat diminished. The Vorthans had been the coalition's primary ally until very recently, when they had suddenly discovered pressing domestic concerns that required their immediate attention. Ambassador Vasquez rose to speak, and the chamber fell silent with an attention that bordered on fearful respect. The elderly human woman smiled warmly at the assembled delegates, and Zarathal suppressed a shiver as she remembered what human warmth could conceal. "Honored delegates," Ambassador Vasquez began, her voice carrying the same conversational tone James used when discussing his research. "I want to address the concerns that have been raised about humanity's recent military activities, the diplomatic euphemism for the complete annihilation of the most feared military force in galactic history. Dad, is some species have suggested that humanity poses a threat to galactic peace. Others have proposed that our capabilities should be regulated for the safety of all civilized worlds." A murmur ran through the chamber. Zarathal knew that behind the scenes, several major powers had been quietly discussing the human problem and what could be done about it. None of them had been willing to state their concerns publicly, of course. Not after watching the coalition fleet simply cease to exist. "I want to address these concerns directly," Ambassador Vasquez continued, still smiling with grandmotherly warmth. "First, let me assure you that humanity has no interest in conquest, domination, or expansion at the expense of other species. We never have. The Soul Defense Grid, our distributed fleet network, and our emergency response capabilities exist for one purpose only: to ensure that no one can threaten human civilians with impunity. The Thraxian delegate, a being whose species had built their entire culture around military prowess, Ambassador, the technology displayed during the coalition engagement exceeds anything in our databases. Where did these capabilities originate?" "Senator Crexthor, I believe you're familiar with human history?" "Only in general terms. Perhaps Dr. Mitchell could provide some context." "James?" Zarathal watched her husband rise from his position in the human delegation. He looked exactly as he had 3 years ago when they first met, scholarly, gentle, utterly harmless. The assembled delegates watched him with the wary attention normally reserved for known predators. "Senators, before humanity reached the stars, we fought approximately 14,000 documented wars against ourselves. Major conflicts involving millions of casualties, minor skirmishes between tribes, everything in between. We developed weapons capable of rendering our own planet uninhabitable. We created strategies that could devastate continents. We learned to fight in every possible environment, under every conceivable condition, against enemies who were just as intelligent and resourceful as we were. The chamber was absolutely silent. When we achieved spaceflight and discovered we weren't alone in the universe, we made a choice. We decided to be better than we had been. We chose diplomacy over warfare, cooperation over conquest, friendship over fear. But choosing to be peaceful doesn't mean forgetting how to be dangerous. It just means keeping that knowledge in reserve until someone forces you to use it. The Thraxian delegate's skin had gone pale. Dr. Jody. Mitchell, are you saying humans have been restraining yourselves? For over a century. Yes, we've been very, very good. Ambassador Vasquez stepped forward again. Which brings us to the current situation. Several proposals have been made regarding human military capabilities. Some delegates have suggested mandatory inspections of human space. Others have proposed limiting human ship construction or requiring supervision of our defensive preparations. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a challenge. I want to make humanity's position on these proposals absolutely clear. We will not accept inspection of our sovereign space by foreign military forces. We will not submit to limitations on our defensive capabilities, and we will not tolerate any attempt to dictate how we protect our families. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Ambassador Vasquez continued as if she were discussing trade agreements rather than drawing lines that could lead to war. However, we understand the galaxy's concerns. The Coalition's destruction was comprehensive, and we realize that our capabilities may have come as a shock to species who knew us only as merchants and diplomats. The Nixarian trade minister, one of Zarathal's own delegates, spoke up. Ambassador, surely you understand that such power concentrated in the hands of any single species represents a threat to galactic stability. Minister Velthos raises an important point, Ambassador Vasquez acknowledged, which is why I'm here to propose an alternative to regulation or restriction. She activated a holographic display that showed star charts of the galaxy's major trade routes, military installations, and political boundaries. Humanity is prepared to offer a guarantee to every species represented in this chamber. We will not initiate aggressive warfare against any galactic power. We will not interfere in legitimate internal affairs of other species. We will not use our capabilities to dominate trade routes or force political concessions. And in exchange, rumbled the Vorthan Prime Minister, in exchange, you will not threaten human civilian populations.
You will not attempt to blockade human space.
You will not support or harbor organizations that target human colonies. And you will not mistake our preference for peace as an inability to wage war. The holographic display shifted to show the debris field that had once been the Coalition fleet. The message was unmistakable. This is what happens to those who forget the difference. A Kraltharian senator, representing a species known for their aggressive expansion policies, stood to object. Ambassador, you're essentially demanding that we accept human supremacy in exchange for your promise not to use it against us. Ambassador Vasquez's smile never wavered, but something in her eyes reminded Zarathal of the moment James had revealed humanity's true nature. Senator Krathmar, humanity doesn't want supremacy. We want to be left alone to live our lives in peace. But if you interpret our desire for peace as weakness, if you mistake our preference for diplomacy as inability to fight, then yes, you will discover that we are supremely capable of defending ourselves. The Coalition made that mistake. They believed humans were soft, weak, unprepared. They thought our small fleet and peaceful reputation meant we were easy targets. They were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations as delegates struggled to process what they were hearing. Humanity was essentially announcing that they were the most powerful military force in the galaxy, but promising not to use that power aggressively as long as no one threatened them. It was the most polite declaration of hegemony in galactic history. The Altarian ambassador, representing one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations, raised her crystal appendage. Ambassador Vasquez, you speak of guarantees and assurances, but power corrupts, as we have seen throughout history. How do we know humans will honor these promises when future generations may feel differently? For the first time, Ambassador Vasquez's warm smile faded slightly. Ambassador Cythera, let me tell you something about human nature that I don't think the galaxy fully understands yet. We keep our promises, all of them, for as long as we exist. She activated another display, this one showing human diplomatic agreements spanning the past century. Trade deals, research partnerships, mutual defense pacts. Every single agreement humanity had ever signed was still in effect, maintained exactly as originally written. Humans don't break their word, Ambassador. We can't. It's not in our psychological makeup. When we promise something, we keep that promise even if it becomes inconvenient, expensive, or difficult. When we make a threat, we follow through on it regardless of the personal cost. The implication sent a chill through the chamber. A species that kept every promise was one that could be trusted to honor their agreements. But a species that kept every threat was something else entirely. The Coalition learned that lesson too late, Ambassador Vasquez continued. We warned them once. We told them exactly what would happen if they threatened civilian populations. You didn't believe us. They thought we were bluffing, that we would compromise, that we would find some middle ground that let everyone save face. The hologram showed the final moments of the Coalition fleet being systematically erased from existence by weapons that still didn't officially exist. We weren't bluffing. We never bluff. James stood again, his gentle academic manner somehow making his words more terrifying rather than less. Honored delegates, I want to make one thing perfectly clear. Humanity doesn't want to be the galaxy's police force. We don't want to dictate policy to other species. We don't want to build an empire or establish colonies throughout known space. We want what we've always wanted, to be left alone to live our lives, raise our families, and pursue our interests in peace. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that represented dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, and trillions of beings. But if anyone decides that peaceful humans are weak humans, if anyone concludes that our preference for diplomacy means we can be safely ignored or casually threatened, then they will discover that the Coalition's fate was not an aberration. It was a demonstration. A demonstration of what? Demanded the Thraxian delegate. Of what happens to those who threaten our families? James replied simply. The vote, when it finally came, was unanimous. Every species represented in the Galactic Council officially accepted humanity's proposal. The Human Accords, as they came to be known, established the framework that would govern galactic politics for generations to come. Humanity would remain peaceful, cooperative, and committed to diplomatic solutions. In exchange, no one would test whether human pacifism was a choice or a limitation. Afterward, as the delegates filed out of the chamber, Zarathal found herself alone with James in the observation deck overlooking the assembly hall. Are you proud of them? She asked, watching the human delegation pack up their materials with the same methodical efficiency she had learned to associate with everything humans did. Of what they accomplished today? Yes, absolutely. And of what they did to the Coalition. James was quiet for a long moment. I'm proud that they defended Earth. I'm proud that they kept their promise to protect human civilians. I'm proud that they demonstrated humanity's capability without using it for conquest or aggrandizement. But I'm not proud that it was necessary. I'm not happy that we had to reveal what we're capable of. I wish the Coalition had accepted our warning and withdrawn peacefully. Zarathul studied her husband's profile as he looked out over the chamber. Do you regret marrying me? Knowing that it brought you into contact with galactic politics that led to this? James turned to her with the warm smile that had first captured her heart. Zara, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You gave me 3 years of genuine peace, genuine happiness, genuine love. That's more than most humans get. And now? Now I'm married to the queen of the Nexarian Empire, who happens to be the only alien leader who truly understands what humanity is capable of. I'd say that makes me the luckiest man in the galaxy. She smiled back, but she knew their relationship had fundamentally changed. She was no longer married to a gentle professor from a peaceful species. She was married to a strategic analyst from the most dangerous military power the galaxy had ever seen. James, what happens now? Really? Now we go home, and I go back to my research, and you go back to running your empire, and we pretend that nothing has changed. The galaxy will leave us alone because they're afraid of us, and we'll leave them alone because that's what we actually want. And if they don't? If someone decides to test human resolve again? James's smile didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Something that reminded her of weapons that could erase matter at the quantum level and ships that chose death over allowing their families to be threatened. Then they'll discover that the coalition was just the beginning. As they left the Galactic Council chambers and returned to their ship, Zaratul realized that she had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history, not just a military victory or a diplomatic triumph, but the birth of a new age of human restraint, maintained by the promise of human unleashing, and she was married to the man who embodied both sides of that terrifying equation. 3 months later, when they returned to Earth for their first visit since the battle, Zaratul was amazed to discover that humanity had simply gone back to being exactly what they had always appeared to be: merchants, diplomats, researchers, explorers. The weapons that had destroyed the coalition were hidden again. The military preparations were disguised once more as civilian infrastructure. But now she knew the truth, and so did the galaxy. Humans were peaceful by choice, not by limitation, and that choice was protected by capabilities that made traditional warfare obsolete. As she watched her husband return to his laboratory and his gentle obsession with xenobiological research, Zaratul finally understood what she had really married into. She had married into a species that had spent millennia learning how to destroy worlds, then chosen instead to build gardens. But they still remembered how to destroy worlds when someone threatened their gardens. And they always kept their promises. Queen assumed her human husband's modesty until reality hit. HFY Stories. Best HFY Stories.